The whisper in the dark. The neon-lit streets of New Olympus buzzed with the usual nighttime activity, but Detective Aria Vega felt anything but ordinary as she made her way through the crowded sidewalks. The weight of her latest case pressed down on her shoulders like a lead blanket, each step feeling heavier than the last. She'd seen her fair share of gruesome crimes in her 15 years on the force, but this was different. The victim had been found in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, their body twisted and contorted in ways that defied natural explanation. Initial reports suggested some kind of ritualistic killing, but as Aria dug deeper, she uncovered a web of connections that stretched far beyond the grimy streets of New Olympus. Her communicator chirped, startling her out of her reverie. "Detective Vega," she answered, her voice clipped and professional despite the turmoil roiling beneath the surface. "Aria, it's me," came the hushed voice of her partner, Detective Marcus Chen. "I've got something. Meet me at the usual spot in 20 minutes. And Aria, watch your back." The line went dead before she could respond, leaving her with a growing sense of unease. Marcus wasn't one for dramatics. If he was this spooked, it had to be serious. 20 minutes later, Aria found herself in a dimly lit corner of the Rusty Nail dive bar favored by off-duty cops and those looking to disappear for a while. Marcus was already there, nursing a glass of something amber and looking like he hadn't slept in days. "What's going on, Marcus?" Aria asked as she slid into the booth across from him. He glanced around nervously before leaning in close. "I've been doing some digging on our Vic," he whispered. Turns out, he wasn't just some random nobody. He was a researcher at Prometheus Labs. Aria felt her blood run cold. Prometheus Labs was one of the most secretive and powerful corporations in the solar system, with tentacles reaching into every aspect of life on Earth and the colonies. What was he working on? Marcus shook his head. "That's the thing. I can't find any record of his projects. It's like someone went in and scrubbed everything clean. But I did manage to recover one file from his personal data chip." He pulled out a small holographic projector and activated it. A series of complex equations and diagrams flickered to life between them, casting an eerie blue glow across their faces. Aria wasn't a scientist, but even she could tell this was far beyond cutting edge. "What am I looking at, Marcus?" "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted, "but from what I can piece together, it looks like some kind of interdimensional gateway technology. The kind of stuff that's supposed to be purely theoretical." Aria felt a chill run down her spine. "You're telling me our victim was working on a way to punch holes in reality?" Marcus nodded grimly. "And I think someone wanted to make sure that knowledge died with him. But here's where it gets really weird." He tapped a few commands on the projector, bringing up a new set of images. "These are scans from the victim's brain. Look familiar." Rhea leaned in, her eyes widening as she recognized the patterns. They were identical to the strange, twisted posture of the body they'd found. "What the hell? Whatever killed him, it wasn't just physical," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was like his mind was turned inside out." Before Aria could respond, the bar's front door burst open with a thunderous crash. The team of heavily armed individuals in unmarked black armor swarmed in, their weapons trained on the startled patrons. "Marcus, run!" Aria shouted, drawing her own sidearm as chaos erupted around them. They bolted for the back exit, the sound of gunfire and shattering glass close behind. As they burst into the alley behind the bar, Aria felt something sharp sting her neck. She stumbled, her vision blurring as a potent tranquilizer coursed through her system. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Marcus being tackled to the ground, and a pair of sleek black boots stepping into view. A distorted voice spoke, as if from a great distance. "Targets acquired. Commencing memory wipe and relocation. The secret must be contained at all costs." As consciousness slipped away, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stumbled onto something far bigger and more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. His secret so dark, so earth-shattering, that those in power would stop at nothing to keep it hidden. And now, she was part of it. Echoes of the forgotten. Aria Vega awoke with a start, her head pounding, and her mouth feeling like it was stuffed with cotton. She blinked, trying to focus on her surroundings, but everything seemed off. The room she found herself in was unfamiliar, a sterile white space that reminded her more of a hospital than anywhere she'd ever lived. "Good morning, Ms. Hernandez," a cheerful voice chirped from somewhere overhead. "It's time for your medication." Hernandez. That wasn't her name. Aria tried to speak, to correct the mistake, but found her thoughts slipping away like sand through her fingers. She felt wrong, somehow, incomplete. A nurse entered the room, smiling brightly as she approached with a small paper cup filled with pills. "Here you go, Lucia. Doctor's orders." Lucia. The name echoed in Aria's mind, feeling both foreign and strangely familiar at the same time. She wanted to protest, to demand answers, but found herself meekly accepting the medication instead. As she swallowed the pills, a fog seemed to settle over her thoughts, muffling the alarm bells that had been ringing in the back of her mind. Days blurred together in a haze of routine and medication. Aria, or was it Lucia, found herself going through the motions of a life she didn't recognize. Group therapy sessions, bland meals in a communal dining area, and long hours staring out the window at a manicured garden that seemed to exist in perpetual twilight. But even through the drug-induced fog, flashes of her true self would occasionally break through. A face glimpsed in a mirror that didn't quite match what she expected to see. Fragments of memories that felt more real than the carefully constructed reality around her. It was during one of these moments of clarity that she first noticed him. A fellow patient, unremarkable at first glance, but with eyes that seemed to hold the same confusion and buried panic that Aria felt. She watched him across the common room, noting the way he would sometimes pause mid-sentence, a look of frustration crossing his face as if he'd lost his train of thought. One day, as they passed each other in the hallway, he pressed something into her hand. A small scrap of paper, hastily folded. Aria waited until she was alone in her room before unfolding it with trembling fingers. The message was simple, written in a shaky hand. "We don't belong here. M. Marcus." The name triggered a flood of fractured memories. A dimly lit bar, equations floating in the air between them, the sound of gunfire and breaking glass. Aria's heart raced as she struggled to piece together the fragments of her true identity. That night, she lay awake in bed, fighting against the sedative effects of her medication. As the facility grew quiet around her, she heard a soft tapping at her door. Cautiously, she opened it to find the man, Marcus, standing there, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and determination. "We have to get out of here," he whispered urgently. "They're messing with our heads, trying to make us forget." Aria nodded, the fog in her mind clearing slightly as adrenaline coursed through her veins. "But how? This place is locked down tight." Marcus grinned, a shadow of his old self shining through. "I've been watching the staff, learning their routines. There's a security panel near the nurses' station. If we can access it, we might be able to override the locks." It was a risky plan, but Aria knew it was their only chance. Together, they crept through the darkened hallways, every shadow seeming to conceal a potential threat. As they neared the nurses' station, Aria's training as a detective began to resurface. She motioned for Marcus to keep watch while she examined the security panel. Her fingers moved almost of their own accord, muscle memory taking over as she bypassed the system's safeguards. With a soft beep, the panel turned green, and the sound of locks disengaging echoed through the quiet facility. "We did it," Marcus breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. But their victory was short-lived. As alarms began to blare, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching rapidly. Rhea grabbed Marcus's hand, and together they ran, pushing through the now unlocked doors and out into the cool night air. The world beyond the facility was a jarring contrast to the sterile environment they'd been kept in. Towering skyscrapers loomed overhead, their surfaces alive with shifting holographic advertisements. Vehicles zipped by on elevated roadways, their anti-grav engines humming softly. "Where are we?" Aria gasped as they ducked into a narrow alley, the sounds of pursuit growing more distant. Marcus shook his head, his eyes darting around nervously. "I'm not sure, but we can't stay here. They'll be looking for us." As they caught their breath, Aria's gaze fell on a discarded newspaper lying among the refuse of the alley. The date printed at the top made her blood run cold. It was nearly 2 years later than she remembered. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What did they do to us?" Before he could answer, a flickering holographic display on the alley wall caught their attention. It was a news broadcast, the anchor's voice filled with barely contained excitement. "And in breaking news, Prometheus Labs has announced a major breakthrough in interdimensional travel. CEO Ilara Frost claims this technology will usher in a new era of exploration and resource acquisition for humanity." Critics, however, warn of potential dangers. The image shifted to show a familiar face, the same researcher whose twisted body Aria and Marcus had investigated what felt like a lifetime ago. But here he was, alive and well, standing beside a statuesque woman with piercing green eyes. "That's impossible," Marcus breathed. "We saw him dead. We." His words were cut off by the sound of approaching sirens. Aria grabbed his arm, pulling him deeper into the maze of alleys and side streets. As they ran, her mind raced with questions. Who were the people chasing them? What was the true nature of the interdimensional technology? And most importantly, what dark secret had they uncovered that was worth erasing 2 years of their lives to keep hidden? One thing was certain: they couldn't trust anyone. In a world where reality itself seemed malleable, Aria and Marcus were on their own, racing against time to uncover the truth before it consumed them all. As they disappeared into the neon-lit shadows of the city, neither of them noticed the small drone hovering silently overhead, its camera tracking their every move. In a hidden control room, a figure watched the feed with growing interest, a cruel smile playing across their lips. Threads of reality. Aria and Marcus huddled in the back of a dimly lit caf, their eyes darting nervously towards the entrance with each chime of the door. They had spent the past week on the run, stealing moments of rest in abandoned buildings and relying on the generosity of strangers who had no idea of the danger they were in. "We need a plan," Aria muttered, her fingers tracing the rim of a chipped mug filled with synthetic coffee. "We can't keep running forever." Marcus nodded, his once neat hair now a disheveled mess. "I've been thinking about that researcher we saw on the news, Dr. Emerson Reed. If he's alive, he might be the key to understanding what's really going on." Aria frowned, memories of the twisted body they'd found in that warehouse flashing through her mind. "But we saw him dead, Marcus. How is that possible?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but it's the only lead we've got. We need to find a way to get close to him, to Prometheus Labs." As they discussed potential strategies, neither of them noticed the woman sitting at a nearby table, her face hidden behind a holoscreen newspaper. But she was listening intently, her cybernetic ear implants picking up every word of their whispered conversation. Agent Lyra Zhao allowed herself a small smile. After days of following false leads and dead ends, she had finally found her targets. But unlike the tactical team that had botched the original capture, Lyra had no intention of bringing Vega and Chen in just yet. No, they were more valuable as free agents, unknowingly leading her to the heart of a conspiracy that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality. As Aria and Marcus left the caf, Lyra followed at a discreet distance, her augmented vision allowing her to track them through the crowded streets. She watched as they made their way to a public data terminal, no doubt searching for information on Dr. Reed and Prometheus Labs. What they didn't know was that every query they made was being monitored, every digital footprint leaving a trail for those who knew where to look. Lyra's implants buzzed softly as she received an incoming transmission from her handler. Status report, Agent Zhao. Targets acquired, she vocalized, her words transmitted directly through her neural link. They're digging into Prometheus Labs. Should I intervene? There was a moment of silence before the response came. Negative. Continue surveillance. We need to know how much they remember and what they've uncovered. This goes deeper than we initially thought. Lyra acknowledged the order and settled in for a long night of observation. As darkness fell over the city, she watched Aria and Marcus make their way to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. The place was a haven for those looking to stay off the grid, its owner known for accepting anonymous cryptocurrency payments and asking no questions. Inside their cramped room, Aria paced restlessly while Marcus pored over the data they had managed to cobble together. It doesn't make sense, he muttered, running a hand through his hair in frustration. According to these records, Dr. Reed has been working at Prometheus Labs for the past 5 years without interruption. There's no mention of his death, no investigation, nothing. Aria paused her pacing, a thought occurring to her. What if what we remember isn't real? What if they didn't just erase our memories, but implanted false ones? Marcus looked up sharply, his eyes wide. You think they could do that? Alter our perception of reality itself? Before Aria could respond, a soft chime emanated from the battered datapad they had acquired. New message had appeared, sent through an anonymous relay that even Marcus's considerable hacking skills couldn't trace. The message was brief, but its implications were staggering. The truth lies between worlds. Find the nexus point. Aria and Marcus exchanged bewildered looks. Could it be Emerson Reed? Aria wondered aloud. Marcus shook his head slowly. I don't know, but whoever sent this, they're taking the huge risk reaching out to us. We need to figure out what they mean by nexus point. As they debated the possible meanings of the cryptic message, neither of them was aware of the silent observer outside their window. Lyra Zhao watched with growing unease, her handler's words echoing in her mind. This was indeed going deeper than anyone had anticipated. The next morning, Aria and Marcus set out with renewed purpose, their search now focused on uncovering the location of this mysterious nexus point. They scoured public records, hacked into secure databases, and even risked venturing into the seedier parts of the city to question those who dealt in forbidden knowledge. It was in one such encounter that they finally caught a break. Information broker, her body more machine than flesh, regarded them with glowing cybernetic eyes as she spoke in a voice laced with static. The nexus point ain't a place, not really, she rasped. It's a convergence, a moment when the walls between realities grow thin. Prometheus Labs has been chasing it for years, trying to har. The nexus point ain't a place, not really, she rasped. It's a convergence, a moment when the walls between realities grow thin. Prometheus Labs has been chasing it for years, trying to harness its power, but they're playing with forces they can't control. Aria leaned forward, her eyes intense. Where can we find it? The information broker's laugh was a harsh, mechanical sound. It ain't that simple, sweetheart. The nexus point shifts, appears in different locations, but word on the street is that Prometheus has figured out how to predict its next manifestation. In 3 days' time, at the old quantum observatory on the edge of the Neon district. As Aria and Marcus left the dingy back alley shop, they felt a mixture of excitement and dread. They were closer to answers, but the danger was mounting with each step they took. Unbeknownst to them, Lyra Zhao had overheard every word of their conversation. She quickly relayed the information to her superiors, her own curiosity growing. What was Prometheus really up to? And why were two supposedly ordinary detectives at the center of it all? The convergence. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. Haria and Marcus knew they would only get one shot at infiltrating the quantum observatory during the Nexus event. They gathered what equipment they could, relying on Marcus's hacking skills to procure security bypasses, and Aria's old police contacts to get their hands on some basic weaponry. As the appointed hour drew near, they made their way through the abandoned streets of the Neon District. Once a thriving hub of scientific research, the area had fallen into disrepair after a series of mysterious accidents years ago. Now, only the occasional flickering hologram advertisement broke the eerie silence. The quantum observatory loomed before them, its once gleaming dome now tarnished and cracked. But as they drew closer, it became clear that the building was far from abandoned. Sleek, unmarked vehicles were parked discreetly around its perimeter, and the faint hum of advanced security systems filled the air. "This isn't going to be easy," Marcus murmured, his fingers dancing over a handheld scanner. "They've got top-of-the-line security, military-grade stuff." Harriet nodded grimly, checking her borrowed pulse pistol. "We didn't come this far to turn back now. Whatever's happening in there, it's the key to everything. We need to see it for ourselves." Using the security codes they had acquired, they managed to slip past the outer perimeter. The interior of the observatory was a stark contrast to its dilapidated exterior. State-of-the-art equipment hummed softly, holographic displays flickering with complex equations and swirling patterns of energy. As they crept through the shadowy corridors, they began to hear voices echoing from the main observation chamber. Peering around a corner, they saw a group of scientists gathered around a massive device that pulsed with an otherworldly light. And there, at the center of it all, stood Dr. Emerson Reed, the man they had seen dead, yet who now directed the others with confident authority. "The convergence is nearly upon us," Reed announced, his voice thrumming with excitement. "Prepare to initiate the quantum bridge." Haria and Marcus exchanged a look of confusion and alarm. Before they could decide on a course of action, a hand clamped down on each of their shoulders. "I wouldn't do anything rash if I were you," a cool voice said from behind them. They turned to find themselves face to face with a striking woman, her green eyes regarding them with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. It was the same woman they had seen standing beside Reed in the news broadcast. "Hilary Frost," she introduced herself, CEO of Prometheus Labs. "I've been expecting you, detectives. Or should I say, our wayward test subjects." Before either of them could respond, the air around them began to shimmer and distort. The low thrumming sound filled the chamber, rising in pitch until it was almost painful. "It's starting," Ilara said, her eyes gleaming with an almost manic light. "The moment of convergence is upon us. Come, let me show you the truth you've been seeking." With no choice but to comply, Aria and Marcus were led into the heart of the observatory. The massive device they had glimpsed earlier now dominated the room, its core a swirling vortex of energy that hurt to look at directly. Dr. Reed turned to greet them, his face splitting into a wide grin. "Ah, our lost lambs returned to the fold, just in time to witness the dawn of a new era for humanity." As Aria opened her mouth to demand answers, the vortex suddenly expanded, tendrils of energy lashing out to envelop them all. The world around them seemed to fracture, reality itself splintering into a kaleidoscope of possibilities. And in that moment of cosmic convergence, the truth was finally revealed: shattered realities. Aria's mind reeled as a flood of memories crashed over her. Not just her own, but thousands of other versions of herself from across the multiverse. She saw worlds where humanity had achieved utopian heights and others where they had fallen into apocalyptic ruin. And through it all, she saw the threads that connected them, the choices, the pivotal moments that shaped the fate of entire realities. Marcus gasped beside her, no doubt experiencing a similar revelation. "My God," he whispered, "it's all real. Every possibility, every choice." Laura Frost's voice cut through the chaos, somehow both distant and intimately close. "Now you understand. Prometheus Labs didn't just discover the multiverse. We found a way to navigate it, to shape it to our will." As the initial shock subsided, Arya began to piece together the fuller picture. The dead body they had investigated wasn't just Dr. Reed. It was a version of him from another reality, one where their research had gone catastrophically wrong. Prometheus had been using the nexus points to pluck key individuals from different timelines, attempting to create a perfect synthesis of knowledge and avoid the pitfalls that led to disaster in other realities. "But why us?" Marcus demanded, his voice raw with emotion. "Why erase our memories? Why the elaborate charade?" Dr. Reed stepped forward, his expression a mixture of pride and regret. "Because in countless realities, it was the two of you who uncovered the truth. Sometimes you stopped us, sometimes you joined us, but you were always the linchpin. We needed to understand why, to see how you would react when presented with the ultimate truth." Arya felt a surge of anger cutting through her awe. "You had no right to play with our lives, with the very fabric of reality itself." Laura's laugh was cold and sharp. "Rights? We're reshaping the destiny of humanity across all possible worlds. The petty concerns of individuals pale in comparison to the stakes we're dealing with." As they argued, none of them noticed the growing instability in the quantum bridge. The vortex of energy began to pulse erratically, the tendrils of interdimensional energy lashing out with increasing violence. It was Lyra Zhao, forgotten in the chaos, who first realized the danger. Her cybernetic implants screamed warnings as the energy levels spiked beyond safe parameters. "Shut it down," she yelled, breaking her cover and rushing towards the control panel. But it was too late. With a deafening roar, the quantum bridge collapsed in on itself, creating a cascading reaction that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of their reality. In that moment of crisis, all pretenses and divisions fell away. Scientists, agents, and detectives worked frantically side by side, struggling to contain the breach before it consumed everything. Arya found herself at the heart of the maelstrom, her newfound multiversal awareness allowing her to see the patterns in the chaos. With Marcus at her side, feeding her the necessary data, she began to guide the others in their desperate efforts to seal the rift. Time seemed to stretch and distort as they worked, the fate of not just their world, but countless others hanging in the balance. And then, with a final, reality-shaking pulse of energy, the breach closed. In the aftermath, as emergency systems kicked in and the dust began to settle, Arya looked around at the shaken faces of those who had just glimpsed the true nature of reality. The laboratory was in ruins, years of research destroyed in minutes. But the cost could have been infinitely higher. Laura Frost sat amidst the debris, her earlier arrogance replaced by a haunted look. "What have we done?" she whispered. Dr. Reed approached Arya and Marcus, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I suppose you'll be wanting answers. Real ones this time." Arya shook her head slowly. "I think we've all seen more truth than we can handle for one day. The question is, where do we go from here?" As the group began to discuss the implications of what had happened and what it meant for the future, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The multiverse was vast beyond comprehension, filled with wonders and horrors beyond imagining. And now that they knew of its existence, could they ever truly go back to their old lives? The shadows of deception had been lifted, but the light of truth brought with it a responsibility that would shape the destiny of not just their world, but all possible worlds. As Arya looked at Marcus, at Lyra, at the chastened scientists of Prometheus Labs, she knew that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. For in a reality where every choice spawns a new universe of possibilities, the power to shape destiny comes with a price that none of them yet fully understood. The dark secret had been revealed. but its consequences would echo across the multiverse for eternity.